Hi, everyone, and welcome to my talk. It's called Advocacy Research in the Canadian Setting. My name is Cheyrl Stenstrom, and I'd like to thank Wendy for inviting me to talk to you today. I'll tell you a bit about my background and then give you an overview of what I'll cover in this presentation. I live in Victoria, British Columbia. I'm currently the assistant coordinator for the San Jose Gateway PhD program at San Jose State University School of Library and Information Science. The program is a partnership with Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. And then I also teach full-time at San Jose State in the areas of research methods, reference, and of course advocacy. Previously, I'd worked in large public libraries in British Columbia and at provincial libraries in both British Columbia and Ontario. And most recently, I was the CEO at South Shore Public Libraries in Nova Scotia, which is a medium-sized regional library with 6 branches just south of Halifax. And like any public librarian, I was doing the things you do when you're running a library, building branches. We were trying to get a new main branch, implementing a strategic plan, increasing our presence in the community, all of those things. But I found myself increasingly asking questions about what we were doing, how we were being effective, whether or not we were just doing the same things we'd always done, because that's the way you do them in public libraries. And of course, one of the questions that takes up a lot of time as a CEO is how to get more funding, or at least sustain the funding we've got. So I didn't really feel like I had a good way to answer all of those questions, and not being the kind of person who likes to do things halfway, I thought one way to develop the skills I needed to be able to answer the questions was to get a research degree. So I'm happy to report that I completed my PhD in 2012 through the San Jose Gateway PhD program under the supervision of Dr. Ken Haycock. And the topic of my talk today is about that research. So before I get started, I'll give you a few words about what to expect in these videos. My talk runs about 20 minutes total, so I've divided it up into 4 videos, and I'm hoping this makes it a bit easier for everyone to view them regardless of your device and your connection. The second thing to note is I haven't prepared any slides for my talk, but a transcription is available. And then finally, since Wendy and I live about 4,500 kilometers from each other, we've decided to take advantage of this distance technology we're using. So she sent me some guiding questions in advance that I'll use to move through my talk, but it'll just be me appearing in the videos. So in this first part, I'm going to spend a few minutes describing my research on advocacy in Canada, and then the second and third parts I'll address, third and fourth parts I'll address the guiding questions of what did I find out in my research, especially what was surprising or unexpected, and what's the take-home message for aspiring advocates. So let's get started. Over the past few years in the popular media, we've heard many examples of budget difficulties for public libraries in many corners of the world, in the US, in the UK, and here in Canada. And while it could probably be argued that both the US and the UK are feeling these effects more than here in Canada, we're certainly not immune. Indeed, a lot of attention was given to the 10% budget cut proposed by City Council for the Toronto Public Library in 2011. But despite this panic, very few research studies have looked at public library funding, and none of them have explored the factors of influence for those making budget decisions. What we know from previous studies is little about public libraries in a political setting has been researched at all. Typically in the past, we've been focused primarily on the perception elected politicians have the role of the public library as compared to the perception held by professional librarians. Other studies have considered the role of the public library director, the board, and library patrons can have on the budget process, or they've looked at external factors like the socioeconomic basis of a community or a country. And then finally, to supplement this, reports appear really frequently in the professional literature of librarianship about advocacy campaigns carried out with the goal of affecting decisions about funding, but little has really been done to measure the impact of these campaigns. So my study was the first to look at the construct of influence in decision-making about funding for Canadian public libraries at any level of government. After examining provincial budgets in Canada for the past decade or so, a little more than that, I noted that a large increase in funding was allocated to public libraries in the province of Alberta in the 2009-10 fiscal year. In the same year, a significant decrease was seen in British Columbia, and no change had been forthcoming in Ontario for public libraries, in fact, over many years. So it's important to note that I've used provincial financial support as a measurement of increase, decrease, or neutral support, but the takeaways here may be applicable in other jurisdictional settings as well. I collected data for my study 3 ways, from primary and secondary documents, and the main source of data for this case was a series of 18 interviews carried out between January and November 2011, and I also did a pilot study in the summer 2010 in a different province. I did a content analysis of the interviews, which consisted of 2 cycles of coding with 2 rounds each, including provisional coding, hypothesis testing, and elaborative coding. And the theoretical framework of influence I used for analysis in this study comes from Robert Cialdini, who's an American social psychologist who's empirically tested the factors that influence people to make decisions the way they do. My findings were focused on creating a thick description of the events leading up to the provincial budget decisions in the 2009-10 fiscal year, as well as this analysis of the applicability of the Cialdini framework of the 6 factors of influence. So, in a nutshell, when decision makers considered funding for public libraries, they most often use 3 distinct lenses from the Cialdini framework. The consistency lens, and that might be somebody saying, what are my values? What would my party do? The authority lens, which would have someone asking, is someone with hierarchical power telling me to do this? But most importantly, the liking lens came up, and this would be somebody saying, how much do I like and know about the person asking? And let me talk about this a bit more, but first I'm going to break here and move to the next video, so hang on a second.